All right, we are back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast, and today we're going to be jumping back into some literature, specifically an author that's impacted me quite a bit, and I've mentioned on the podcast a few times, but this author is working on a new book, and he's one of the most well-known authors in the self-help psychology space. But it's a lot more than that. And given that he was on kind of promoting his new book, and he's been pretty active on social lately, he's a huge mentor for someone else that we've talked about extensively on this podcast, being Ryan Holiday. And they work together a lot. But the topic for today is going to be the author, Robert Greene, going through some of his works and key concepts and how it really applies to the modern world and everything on this podcast. What are your thoughts, Stephen?
I like it. Didn't really know too much about him until you mentioned him. Obviously, we're groupies of the My First Million podcast, and he was a guest on that one recently. And so I listened to that one back, and it was a good hour and 20-minute episode to really dive into who he is and his works. I have not read his books, but I know you have. At least a couple of them. He's written about 7 or 8 of them, I think. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to dive in. I think you'll have a lot to share, and I think there's going to be a lot of philosophies and things that, in the frameworks and the way he thinks that we're going to find that resonate well with how we try to operate and build our lives as we continue to define success for ourselves. So I think it's a great topic. I love doing these ones, and it gives an opportunity to deep dive into someone's life and their works.
Yeah, and a perfect example of defining success for yourself, why we kind of chose this author, and hopefully sending the listeners down a potential next book or just take a look at some of Robert Greene's material, is the fact that he really went through in his early life, though he graduated UC Berkeley, started traveling and doing a lot of jobs trying to figure it out before he even knew he wanted to become a writer. Kind of had that romantic move to Europe, and I'm going to write a novel. Failed miserably at that, though he had a good time and went through that struggle, but worked a lot of odd jobs. Construction worker, was a translator for a while, tried to do some writing in Hollywood. And when we talk about defining success for ourselves, what he realized right away is being a writer in a structured organization where he had an actual boss was not going to work for him. So that was one of the key things early in his life that he figured out quite a bit. He's also a late bloomer, which we've talked a little bit on this podcast before as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because he talked about it on the pod a little bit. One of his first books was the Art of Seduction. And he talks about, and it's not necessarily, some of it is seduction, in terms of sex and, seducing the other sex and, trying to, romance, procreate or whatever. Yeah. Romance and all that. But more importantly, it's art of seduction of business and your personal brand. And just how do you get people, not in a manipulative way, but in a way to like you and trust you and all that kind of stuff. But he explains that he wrote that book because Sam, one of the hosts of that podcast, was like, where does this come from? And it was in his early 20s when he was in Europe. He was in Paris, and he said he was at, I think he was working at, I don't know what the name of the hotel was, but it was the hotel that brought in all the supermodels, and that they would do all the runway shows and all that stuff there. And he's like a young buck, and he remembers there was this guy, he didn't know who he was, but there was this guy that was always there too. And he would always walk in and out of there with different models. And he was like, how the heck is this guy doing it? These are some of the most beautiful women in the world. And why can't I do this? And, he's 23, 24 years old or whatever. And he learned from this guy and picked his brain and, figured out how to be attractive to other people for whatever it is that you may want. And so he wrote a book called The Art of Seduction. And that's kind of where that started in his path of learning and development and growth. Was he just wanted to learn about things in the world. And then I think he even said he's read like for each one of his books, he's read 300 of them to compile his one book. So it's pretty cool to look at the preparation and the amount of knowledge that he had to gain in order to share his perspective on various topics.
And now Robert is a lot older, right? Born in 1959, and he just suffered a stroke, by the way, which we'll get to in a bit. He's writing because of this stroke, he's even struggling to type. So he's handwriting and one keying in this book, which is a whole separate discussion. But even when he was a young man, he's self-proclaimed. He said he wasn't the studliest guy, not the best looking guy, didn't have any money at the time, but was still able to interact with women and people at the time, operate through the world that made him interesting enough to where he was able to have conversations, bring value and add value. And that's where that, the law of seduction, which is a part of the 48 laws as well. He talks about it in most of his book, but that's where I really wanted to kick us off.
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the most popular one, is the 48 laws, right?
Yeah, and it probably has some of the best marketing you can have, because he was blending. There are two books that they say are not allowed or they're outlawed in prison. And he based a lot of his material around Sun Tzu's The Art of War. But the other one is this 48 Laws of Power. Now, I don't know if that's a fact or just the best marketing ever, because that is what helped it catch on for a while, is that rumor that it wasn't allowed in prison. Can neither confirm nor deny that. But the 48 Laws of Power has sold more in the last 4 years and this year than it did when it was released in the first 20 years. It was written in 1998. So it really has stood the test of time, because he has referenced so much of history and gives examples historically of all of these concepts throughout history in this book.
I did not know that. So do you think it was marketing, you said? Like, you think that does he even really get involved with that? Or you hire a team to do it? Or what do you think took to it become so popular more recently?
What I would guess happened is it did catch on in prison at one point, and behavior started changing. And then that word got out that maybe one prison said, hey, this book's catching on. And then if you're him, when he talks about how 50 cent markets, you use that to your favor. This book's so powerful that they won't let you read it in prison, because it has that big of an impact in that controlled of an environment. Yeah, control the environment, power against the authority or whatever. And it's not like, so like one of the laws is never outshine the master. Law number one. Right? It's don't make superiors feel insecure, make them feel powerful, even though you're still going to ultimately get what you need or what you want or whatever, but you never go above and beyond them outwardly. It just never ends well. And I heard framing that, like, from your perspective, you can even reframe that as, if you're a business owner, we always hear the term, the customer comes first. Yeah. The customer's kind of your master in that way. 100%. Yeah. If you're trying to take the ego and be right, you're outshining the master. And I loved hearing that concept flinch, because it's not just for in hierarchical organizations, or, historically it was in hierarchical social tiers, back all the way up to the king, or now modern in corporate structures in the military, et cetera. But you can flip that into, we all are serving someone or have different masters. That outshining from an entrepreneurial perspective, I thought was interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a bit of whether it's a prospect or a current client or a partner or whatever, you're going to try and adapt your services to make them feel comfortable working with you. Now, I mean, there are times when it's like, hey, this isn't the right customer for us. And you just have to be like, hey, this just doesn't fit our model. But when you have a client on board, you've already come to an agreement or set the expectation that this is a fit for both parties. And then when something happens, it's never the client's fault. You always got to fall on the sword. And you can consult, you can be like, hey, this is what we could do better, I think, moving forward, communication wise or whatever. But it's never like, you did this is your fault, you're screwing it up, whatever. You're not trying to pinpoint or point fingers at anybody. And it's just a matter of, letting them it's almost like, the let them book that Mel Roberts, Mel Robbins wrote, like, let them win, like, just move on, right? Just move on. Let's come to a resolution, and then we'll come back again on something else. But it's back to what's important, right? Focusing on what's important and keeping that North Star and steering toward it. Yeah. The 48 Laws of Power, that was actually the second book that I got, and I'm not going to lie, I'm jumping back into it as it's 22 hours on audio. And I can't remember where I left off, but I'm recalling a lot of stories from it. But his 2012 book was actually my gateway drug to Robert Greene, and it's called Mastery. And there are so many great principles on that book surrounding the process of achieving excellence in any field, all the way from Da Vinci to contemporary neuroscientists, and the thoughts of apprenticeship, which you and I kind of did, right? They weren't an internship as a way of apprenticeship, but he did this with Ryan Holiday in the sense that Ryan Holiday worked for him for free, watched how he took notes, how he did research, how he wrote books, and how that is how you, even though you're not being paid with money, that is the foundation of mastery, is finding a model of excellence and doing as they do to build your own kind of point of view and your own craft.
Isn't that the ultimate ROI? Like just willing to learn and do something for free because you know that this knowledge that I'm gaining will eventually become fruitful once I put it into application and execution.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's awesome. I did not know that story about Ryan Holiday and all of his stuff, the stoicism stuff and all of his books, and everything's incredible. I mean, he's a great writer as well. But mastery is we talk about that a lot too, is mastering your craft. And that craft, we've talked about generalism. We've talked about honing in on one certain thing, but I think these are really good, like topics for anyone listening. These are really good ideas and things that everyone should know and learn about the human psychology and being able to adapt and work within this crazy technological world.
Absolutely. And it's pretty interesting on the back to the Holiday and Greene time together, because they're also able to help each other out. And you remember American Apparel, right? Right across the office from us in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
Well, they started there. There's an interesting documentary out about that business and the founder, and Robert Greene was actually on the board there. And Holiday was the director of marketing before everything went crazy with that company. Greene helped, again, Holiday with the discipline of writing and research and doing deep work on becoming an author, while Holiday helped Greene in how to market the books when he didn't have the buzzwords about the prison anymore, how to actually make a book circulate. And again, the master became the teacher, and the teacher became the student became the teacher, and the teacher became the student in that relationship.
Well, they're skilled in different areas. It's a great partnership. All right. So what were the biggest takeaways from mastery? Because I would say mastery is like when you combine knowledge with, intuition, right? It's like the ability, like you've learned something so well that you can foresee the future based on trends and tactics and things that you've seen. You're now a master because nothing can get past you. You understand it so well. Maybe it's an industry, maybe it's a skill, building furniture, whatever. Like you just know, running payroll, like you just know how it works so well that you can do it with your eyes closed and you can talk someone through the system without even needing to be logged in or whatever. But what are some of the biggest takeaways you got from that book?
Yeah, we know that Malcolm Gladwell's given a lot of credit for the 10,000 hours rule, which I think obviously influenced this a lot, or maybe vice versa. But it's not just 10,000 hours, right? We talk about intentional, iterative repetitions with feedback, right? Repetitions in consciousness equals skill. I think one of the bigger takeaways was not only is it important to go and specialize and see the world and put yourself in different environments, but he talked about maintaining focus on building skills, not just putting yourself into an environment like a corporate area or one vocation, but making sure you were narrowing down your interest that you were going to be able to add value and eventually make a living on, while intentionally getting feedback from a mentor, mentee, and iterating on what you are specifically going to bring to that said vocation. So he does lean more toward finding your passion or something that captivates you, something that makes you get into flow, because if not, it's going to be tough to stick with it. We talk a lot about the other end of maybe you don't even know what your passion or purpose is, and you have to get those repetitions in a given field. So just choosing one to actually go through the long haul, not switching immediately, is super important. And then after you get to a certain point with that mentor, putting your specific flavor on it. What is the prism that comes through you that makes this craft or skill different? Whatever you're bringing to the world that you're achieving mastery in, what is it about you that only you can deliver? I think were some key takeaways from that book.
Yeah, those are awesome. I mean, when you were talking, it was like a lot of it just reminded me of alignment, like figuring out what it is that you want, how to get there, and saying no to everything else and mastering the things that matter. But for those that don't know, your second point, have you ever heard of the "what's not David" analogy?
Oh yeah, the chiseling away. But yeah, expand on that.
Yeah, like so, David, the statue. The way that was created was chiseling away to form David, right? It wasn't built from scratch to form David. It was like chiseling away the things that don't serve you. And so it's like, what are the things that you don't want? Like start there. If you're not sure what it is that you do want, start with what are the things I don't want, and then write those things down And then anything that comes your way that aligns with those, you're not going to do them. And then you're just going to kind of start figuring out your personal core values and figuring out the direction that you want to go based on what you said, iterating and trying new things and challenging yourself on purpose and figuring out what is going to stick and where you find your passions, which then goes to passion to purpose and gives you that drive. But yeah, What's Not David is a cool exercise to kind of figure out, okay, what are the things I don't want that helps provide clarity for the things that you do want?
And I think that's what's so cool about Greene's work is even say you're not a history buff, it kind of makes you become a history buff because of the timeless examples he gives. And that's what's, I think, so special why he sold so many books is this flow of here's the historical evidence of these laws or these theories in practice and what happened in history. Here's how they relate to today, and translating that via words. It shows the amount of time it took to write these works that are no small flip through books. They're but still very, very fun to read. So I think that's pretty special.
Yeah. And he talks about your life's task. So it's like the same thing as us saying what's
MTP.
Your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the similar idea, but he calls it your life's task. And he believes that everyone has one. Everyone has a life's task. He talks about Tiger Woods when he was, he discovered his life's task when he was 3 years old, because the excitement around golf and whatever, right? First time he saw his dad, put a golf club in his hand, and it just stuck with him. He figured out his life's task early. Not everyone figures it out early, but the beauty of what he defines your life's task is a lot of it comes from your childhood, because you are built to figure out the things that you absolutely love to do when you're a kid. But then all these other distractions and nuances of life come to happen, and you don't get reminded of those passions anymore. And so you sway and you just do what your parents tell you to do, or take go to the college that everyone says you should do, or go into the profession that that someone else. And so you're allowing distractions and other people kind of force your way a little bit. But the good news is he says that, like, even if you haven't figured out your life's task, or if you're not on the right path right now, in your 40s and 50s, maybe in your 60s, it starts getting pretty hard to make a transition or a switch to some other vocation. But there's still plenty of time if you're, 50 years old or younger. And he says it's not that it's impossible when you're older, it's just a little bit harder. But figuring out your life's task. And I think these books around mastery and the 48 laws of power and all this also help build that foundation for the confidence to go after your life's task if it seems too grand for you right now.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be candid. That's the third podcast I've listened to his, and it kind of wakes me up the way he talks about each decade and how he talks about, your 40s. There's still time, but you're going to be running down with energy, and you've got some serious ingrained habits that are going to be a little tougher to get the grooves in. And he basically says 50s, again, still a chance, but by 60, there are outliers, which is obvious, but he's saying as a theme, trying to get on this path of mastery earlier and knowing the laws of human nature, which I want to make sure we cover at a high level before we wrap here, and working these things in earlier as you build your identity in this world is super critical. In case we lost some listeners on the historical buff stuff, maybe that's not your thing and whatnot. I thought it was so cool. 2009, around the time you and I met, they released, I didn't realize that it was 2009 when they released it, a very unlikely collaboration called The 50th Law with 50 Cent.
50 Cent, yes.
And no one saw that coming. Again, great marketing when you kind of have a psychology, human behavior nerd, and one of the biggest rappers of all time, and strong businessman of all time, said he was so impacted by Robert and them talking about where they met, kind of a gangster steakhouse, and he was nervous to meet 50, and he thought that 50 was actually admitted to being a little bit nervous meeting him, because Robert Greene, a lot of his works have a lot of Niccolo Machiavelli themes to it, which wrote The Prince this is ancient history in Italy. And that was the first works about like how to manipulate. And Robert Greene does get a little bit of polarization in regard that, these are back to the prison thing. You're just learning how to manipulate people. This can be psychological warfare that you're enabling people with. It's like, it's simply knowledge and documenting history. It's up to the individual and the character and the integrity of the human being and what they're going to do with the information, like everything in life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so tough, especially in sales, right? Like, do you get the impression sometimes like sleazy salespeople or even really good salespeople, are they manipulating you, or are they just opening your eyes up to what's possible and the need that you didn't know you needed to resolve, the problem that you didn't know you had? And it's like, it's not manipulation. They're, especially the good ones, they're really trying to solve a problem in your business. And even if you can't see it, you may not be the full-blown expert in every single area of your business, but this person is, and they see this time and time again with other businesses just like you. And so they're going to open your mind up to a problem that you didn't know you had, and then they're going to solve that problem. Yeah, there's going to be a trade-off. You're going to pay them for it, but you're going to get time back in your day, or you're going to get that, executive hire by hiring the recruiter that can see things that, ahead of you. Right. And so it's not manipulation. It's just opening up their mind and their eyes to, oh, there is a better way. It's not an old dog, new tricks type of situation. And, if it's not broke, don't fix it. No, it's, let's figure out, there's always something to make more efficient. There's always ways to save money. There's always ways, maybe not even to save money, but it's just going to be better processes internally to build culture or happiness within your team or whatever. Right. And so I think manipulation gets thrown around, especially in the sales world. And it's not 100% accurate. I think there are people that do it in a negative way and feel good about it. But for the most part, I mean, great salespeople, successful long-term salespeople or entrepreneurs are not manipulators. They're
that's what I was going to say. It's not just salespeople. I think of business leaders trying to run an organization. You have to be able to give a compelling vision and influence the team that you built. And it's back to Spider-Man, Peter Parker's uncle, saying, "You with great power becomes great responsibility." And if you know that on whatever you believe about good or evil or right or wrong, if one side's going to have it, it has to be combated with knowledge and awareness of the other side to guide us to that, back to that North Star and purpose. So in my opinion, if the information's out there, it needs to be there, and it needs to be communicated along with holding to some type of moral grounds that is good for society as a whole. So
yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation, man. I'm gonna pick up Robert Greene's books on Audible. Listeners, if you have a chance to grab any of them, 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, Art of Seduction. Those are just a few that he's
and Laws
written.
of Human Nature, all great reads. And even if you just grab summaries, play with ChatGPT, YouTube, and maybe it'll be a gateway to check out those works.
Love it. Like, subscribe, follow. We'll be back at you next week.